Welcome back. The world is turning. We're having multiple white pill moments and life's turning around. So sit down with us and take your white medicine. My name is Sadie.
And I'm Jacob.
And I wanted to start today with a white pill, something happier.
Let's do it.
It's more local, so I don't have any official news stories to show you because I don't really want to advertise where we live.
Yeah,
but
we don't want creepers knowing how awesome we are. So.
But a lady that I work with has a 6-year-old who goes to school in your school district.
Okay.
And she said that starting February 21st, students are not required to wear masks anymore.
Wait, they were required to wear masks this whole time?
Mm-hmm.
What?
But it's going away probably forever because I think enough parents were
that
like, this is ridiculous.
That actually surprises me. My school district.
Yeah.
I would have figured that my school district would have been one that like ditched the mask mandates like a year ago.
No, actually, they were doing online learning for most of 2020 and part of 2021. And
do I need to vote out the mayor?
Probably. But yeah, even she was kind of like, yeah, I'm really over the mask. My husband's really over the mask.
Is
my
she a
daughter's really over the
left-leaning
mask.
person, you said?
Yeah, I would say she's a Democrat, but mostly just because she doesn't really pay attention.
So, okay.
She doesn't seem very bright either.
Yeah.
But
There's like...
But it's kind of a white pill because she was like, you know what, we're just done. And the school's making, like, it's up to the parents now if they want to send their kids to school with a mask. But like my daughter loses her mask all the time anyway, so it's kind of ridiculous. And online learning sucks. And
yeah,
as far as like a parent standpoint,
well,
she's I think relieved.
Tim Pool actually had a great point about this. For as much as we consume the news every day, you have to imagine the average person is just going about their lives just getting a trickle of new information.
Yeah.
Like they're not getting this deluge of information that we get every day. And so the fact that normal people, like I would classify her as a normal person, not really, spending much time paying attention. She's finally got to the point where it's like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Kids shouldn't really be masked. We're over this thing. This is a conclusion that many of us came to months up to a year ago, maybe even longer ago. But it's good that people are like the tide is turning. And of course you have the Democratic states dropping their mandates, like one after another, all at the same time. The science, like for some reason, the science changed at the beginning of February.
Weird.
Like science was like mask or you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And then February 1st rolls around, it's like science changed.
Yeah.
It's like what?
Yeah, but it was good to hear. She's like, I went to the grocery store for the first time and didn't wear a mask, and I was like, and how did you feel? And she was like, it was really weird. And I'm like,
for the first time, oh my goodness.
Yeah, she's like, my husband stopped wearing them a long time ago, but I don't know, I just kind of kept doing it. But yeah, I thought it was good news that the school district that you pay taxes for is finally lifting that. I mean, neither of us have children, but it's still good news. I mean, I want freedom of choice for parents.
Yeah, while we're on this topic, I have this story here, which is from the Washington Post, and the headline tells you everything you need to know. It says, mask mandates didn't make much of a difference anyway. Now, to play devil's advocate here, they're not making a statement in that headline about masks directly. They're using the proxy, which is mask mandates, right?
Yes.
Ben Shapiro's also done this a lot, where he said, I don't want to say anything about the masks, but the mandates very clearly haven't worked. It's like, well, okay, just go a level deeper then and just say that the masks didn't work. Because if the mandates didn't work, then the masks didn't work.
Right.
It's like, so, and then this is the relevant part of the article here that I will read very quickly. And it says, but there's no avoiding it. The benefits of universal masking have been difficult to quantify. Yeah, no shit. One controlled study in Bangladesh showed a small but statistically significant benefit among people who consistently used masks. 7.6% got symptomatic infections compared to 8.6% in the control group. Other studies have been inconclusive. So this is what we call an outlier.
Also, statistically significant and small are opposites. I just want to say, because for it to be statistically significant, it has to be a large enough number. So if it's small, then it's not statistically significant.
Right. Well, and it depends on what your margin of error is, right? Because you can have a statistically significant result that's like 0.01% difference, right? It depends on how precise your study is.
Exactly.
But
statistic significance comes from your p-value, which is determined mathematically. So, and it's not usually... It sounds like they're trying to say, like, the participation was small. Like the study was small, but it was statistically significant. But the way they word it makes it sound like the number they got was small, so it's not actually statistically significant. But I think it might just be they don't know what they're saying.
Yeah. And then this is the golden paragraph here, which is which perfectly illustrates this whole debate and frames it very nicely. And it says, "It is intuitive that a barrier ought to prevent germs from being emitted into the air." Oh, really? Because this is what the quote-unquote anti-maskers have been saying. Yes, that is intuitive, unless it's an aerosolized virus, which it goes on to say. It says, "But if that's true, why isn't there more evidence for the benefits of masking 2 years into the pandemic? Experts associated with the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy, CIDRAP, at the University of Minnesota have laid out a more complex analysis. Given the current understanding that the virus is transmitted in fine aerosol particles, it's likely an infectious dose could easily get through and around loose-fitting cloth or surgical masks." So, University of Minnesota is now 100% confirmed conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, how dare they say this is transmitted through the air? They are a crackpot institution, and they need to be silenced immediately.
Right. But every anti-mask argument I've ever heard going back to the beginning of the pandemic made this exact argument.
Yeah.
And even like a year ago, people were saying the same thing that this Washington Post article was saying, like, hey, it's a year into the pandemic and we have no indication whatsoever that masks do anything.
Well, and I remember thinking when people were like, I'm wiping off my groceries and changing my clothes when I get home, I was like, isn't this airborne? Like, I just somehow equated it immediately to a flu-like thing. And I was like, I feel like it's aerosolized, not contact. Like, you're not going to touch something and then get COVID.
Well, that makes sense for respiratory viruses, right? You would think a respiratory virus would primarily transmit through the air.
Right. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to, but you would think that that would be
it could spread with particulates, but I'm like, that doesn't seem to add up to me. And I am not in any way a doctor or have any experience in biology, but just being a person with common sense who has been sick in my life, I'm like, I just don't understand. And then people started saying that it's an aerosolized virus. Like that was something the CDC and Dr. Fauci came out and said it was aerosolized, but they still pushed the mask thing. And, all of these crackpot conspiracy theorists are saying aerosolized viruses can still transmit through especially cloth barriers, but also even the surgical ones.
Right.
Really only the N95 and KN95s do anything, which they've come out and said recently, but you can still get it through those because they don't filter out everything.
Right. They're not 100% effective, and especially not when they're in the hands of the general public.
No.
Like, they're going to be wearing them inoptimally and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Anytime there's like protective equipment that you're supposed to be wearing, there is a strict protocol you're supposed to follow when you, adorn it and take it off. But your everyday person's not going to follow those protocols. They're not trained in it. They're not going to do that. So it's still kind of
And
useless.
I saw the U.S. is finally sending out free masks at various places. And I saw one picture. It was literally like one of those Walmart bins with just like loose masks all in there. Like, hey, free, take as many. It's like, okay, so these masks, which are supposed to stop transmission, you're just contaminating all of them by letting them sit outward.
At least put them in like single-use plastic.
Yeah, they weren't even that.
Things.
They were just piled up.
That's so gross.
It was so stupid. Like, everything about this is just, we're in the clown timeline, 100%.
We're definitely in the clown timeline. I'm just imagining the types of people that actually look at that bin full of masks and are like, oh, yeah, I need these masks. But then there's also people who wash those masks. Like, what are you doing?
It's just, I'm glad that it's over.
Clown world.
We're way too late on this being over, but at least it's over.
Well, people are just sick of it. They're just so sick of it.
Yeah. I should have been sick of it a year ago, but here we are. But hopefully this is one of the last few episodes where we will be talking about COVID.
Yes. I really do want to talk about the Freedom Convoy.
Okay.
Though, just because it's been going on for about a month now, almost, just about.
Yeah. Well,
And I think it's really amazing. And I have been following it closely for the last 2 weeks because we haven't done a podcast in like 2 weeks.
Right.
And it's really starting to hit its peak, and
yeah, it's getting spicy.
The biggie media corporations. Oh my God, stutter. I'm Joe Biden. I approve this message. The media corporations and the big leaders of the world are really starting to get antsy in their pantsy because they're like,
yeah,
what's going on
what
with
came
this?
out just today as they were the Freedom Truckers were blocking, I think they're blocking 3 international crossings from the U.S. to Canada, and one of them, I believe, is the Ambassador Bridge.
Yes.
The police are moving in and clearing them out now. I think that happened today. I don't know what the status of that is
Oh, were
now.
they successful in clearing them out?
I'm sure they were, because I didn't see anything on the right-wing Twitter about like a triumph of the protesters, so I'm sure that the police had their way and got the bridge cleared. But as far as I know, 2 other border crossings are still occupied, and then there's still people in Ottawa.
Yes, they have not left the capital at all, and I'm pretty sure Trudeau is still in hiding.
Yeah, where is he?
Well, you're not supposed to know, because then they'll kill him.
He's hanging out in Cuba with his Vaza.
Cuba. His Vaza. Yeah. But I've just been watching videos of I guess they're protesters. Yeah, the protesters that are there, and they're having a good time. They're partying. They're talking to media and condemning them. And they're working class people, working class Canadians. It's really upsetting that it had to be Canadians that really took up arms and did this. But I guess the boot isn't on our neck as much collectively, because it's more of a state to state thing.
Well, if the Biden vaccine mandate had stuck, I'm sure you would have seen similar in the United States. But because of the fractured nature, and because federal action has fallen flat at every turn, you have states like the one we live in, which has basically been open, no masks, no mandates, or no anything. And you have blue America's doing their thing and red America's doing their thing. So there's less of a tension there to actually go and do something.
If it had been imposed on every state federally, I think at least the red states would have rallied. Mm-hmm. But since the red states have been pretty open for the last, I would say, 2 years, if not a year and a half, we're kind of over it. But the Canadians they're over it, and it's really cool too, because you're seeing a lot of the liberal, like, parliamentarians are actually asking Trudeau to lighten up on the mandates and open up the country and do all of these things, and he has had no response to them. Not shocking, because he's a coward, as noted by his being in hiding. But because honestly, the convoy would probably dissipate immediately if he said, okay, no more mandates, no more anything. We're just going back to whatever. Yeah,
their one demand is stop with the COVID nonsense. Like, that's
exactly
it. That's their only demand. They will leave as soon as you say that, as soon as you grant them that.
I'm pretty sure the Canadian population is like in the mid-80s vaccinated too.
Yeah.
Mid-80s percentile, whatever, vaccinated. And so it's like they're all okay with the 20-some% that aren't. They just want to get back to their lives.
Yeah. And the vaccination requirements for international travel makes absolutely zero sense. Like, no travel restrictions at all ever have made any difference in the spread of new variants.
No.
Like, the current Omicron variant came out of South Africa. It got here.
Well, we didn't have a travel ban on South Africa, did we?
No. The United States, I believe, requires vaccinations for entry from abroad.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So if the only people that were coming to the United States at the time Omicron arose were vaccinated people, we still got it. So it's like, I don't know how many times you have to try a policy or how long you have to keep a policy in place while it's not working before you just say, okay, let's pivot and do something else. Like, I don't understand. And this is where people are saying, well, it's not about the policy. It's about power. It's about exercising state authority for whatever reason, because they're World Economic Forum stooges, or because they're just petty individuals, whatever it is. It's literally about power. They just want to subjugate people. It's nothing. It's not about anything else.
No, it's not. And this trucker convoy really has a lot of people twiddling their thumbs and getting really worried. And there's rumors that there was going to be a trucker convoy in the United States for this weekend, because it's Super Bowl weekend. Super Bowl is going to be happening tomorrow. But I haven't heard anything since. I don't think that's actually happening.
Yeah.
I think they just got really, really worried because they see how effective it is in Canada. And
well, it started in France too. Did you see that?
Yes, I did. And I was like, this is awesome. And actually the start of the convoy in France, I mean, the French are no strangers to protests.
Riots.
They're very good at it, and
Yes.
their government usually responds to them and their demands, which is really cool. Because they don't want another revolution on their hands. But the French trucker convoy actually sparked this article, which is from the Post Millennial, and it's them reporting on a video clip from a segment on CNN, and the headline reads, "Watch, CNN fears Freedom Convoy inspiring others across the globe." And they pretty much just transcribed this video. So if we could just play it, you pretty much get all that you need from it.
Okay.
So I think Canadians generally, and maybe the international community as well, is looking at this and we're just scratching our heads and wondering why we really haven't had a more fast solution. Because in failing to act, quite frankly, I think this movement has spread within Canada and also now might be spreading internationally.
Yeah, and we want to talk about that because the longer they stay, the more they do inspire others across the globe. We know that there have been similar demonstrations in New Zealand and across Europe, tapping into the anti-vaccine sentiment, pandemic fatigue, and also inciting this civil disobedience. And now the US Department of Homeland Security says trucker convoys like these could soon disrupt the Super Bowl in the United States and, of course, the State of the Union and other big events. How bad do you think this could get, and how do you stop this?
Well, honestly, I never expected it to get really to this point. I mean, I was well aware of who was organizing this event, but if you had told me this would spark off a worldwide rebellion of angry people with industrial machinery, I would not have believed that 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
So... Oops.
It's autoplay. Autoplay. But yeah, that's quite, her accent is insufferable, by the way.
Yeah, what is she, Montrealian or whatever?
No,
is she from Quebec?
No, the one on the left.
That's what I'm saying. Is she from Quebec?
No, that's like British, isn't it?
I don't think so.
Well, anyway, whatever it is.
I think they're both Canadian, but like different breeds of Canadian.
No, that was definitely, anyway. That was definitely not Canadian. But yeah. I do think that there's a little bit, I think it shows that they're scared, that they're hysteric about like, the Super Bowl could be next, or the State of the Union. Mm-hmm. It's like there's been no indication that that's going to happen. No. That's just something like somebody put out into the universe, and now the liberals are like scared that it's going to happen. God, but there's like no reason for that to happen in the United States right now, I don't think. No, I don't. And I don't think it will unless some kind of federal imposition in the future comes up, which is not likely to happen, not for COVID-19, but maybe for something else. So, I mean, as far as nationally, we're over it, and we're not going to protest largely like the Canadians are, but they are like, we need to act fast. It's like, act fast by meeting the people's demands. I mean, you have a convoy that's miles and miles long, and it's blocking international travel, and people can't get their goods, and life in Canada has pretty much halted because of this. And so it's really simple. Just give them the one thing that they want and everything will go back to normal. They'll probably party in the street for a day or two, and then they'll all get back to work. Right. Like, it's not that, but they don't, not that big a deal. They don't want to give them their demands, right? Right. And the stupid part is that they voted for Trudeau again recently. Yeah. Like, he just became prime minister again. It's like, you people voted for this. Yeah. And now you have to protest. Maybe you should have not voted for him the first time. They shouldn't have. From the beginning. But I mean, maybe there's like a global reckoning coming soon. Maybe people are fed up with these tyrants, but I don't know. We'll see. They might get someone like Trudeau again, despite all this happening. So it's like, well, and it's likely that they will, because Canada is a more liberal nation than we are as a whole. Yeah. Which is a little surprising, but I think they tend to lean to the left more than we do nationally, and so they tend to vote in prime ministers that also lean to the left. Yeah, we'll see. It doesn't help that it seems like their conservative leadership isn't that strong either in Canada. No, I don't remember who it was, but the guy that was like the leader, Eric O'Toole, I think his name was. Yeah, he resigned. Yeah, he resigned because he wasn't being strong, because he was basically, he wasn't like echoing support for this convoy or anything like that, or he wasn't even pushing that hard for an end to the mandates. And then the Conservative Party was like, look, we can't have you being the leader because you're way out of line with our base. So they kicked him out. So hopefully they get some stronger leadership, or somebody's taken up that mantle.
I think, what's his name? Pierre something, Polivier or something. I think that's how you say his last name. He has been a very vocal conservative parliamentarian through all of this, and I think the Conservative Party is really trying to put him up as the new leader of the party. But I know there's like an election process that has to go through for that to happen. But he's been in headlines a lot lately, and I actually really like him.
Yeah,
I like him a lot.
Well, the fortunate thing about being American is that Canadian politics doesn't really influence us, so
Not too terribly.
I don't really care too much who they pick, but it is nice to see people standing up against objective tyranny.
Yes.
Across the world. So it gives me hope for the ideas of freedom and liberalism broadly, and this also gives me hope. This tweet is from the Globe and Mail. It says, "The alt-right has weaponized freedom to undermine democracy."
Sure.
So I have a snippet here, but I just want to... I think I've talked about this before. This idea that democracy by itself, in and of itself, is just a good, and anything that threatens or takes away the power of democratic majorities is bad, always. It's totally wrong, right?
Yeah.
Democracy is just a mechanism by which you run the government. It involves the input of the people. That doesn't tell you anything about whether the government's doing anything appropriate. That's just the mechanism, right? If the people vote, 51% say, hey, we're going to commit a genocide against the 49%, that's not an appropriate use of democracy. It might be democratic.
As we saw in the Reichstag.
Right.
Yeah. Reichstag
so it might be technically democratic, but that would be a poor use of democracy, it wouldn't be a legitimate government, period.
Right.
So this idea that anything that undermines democracy is automatically bad. No. If we have to undermine democracy to preserve individual sovereignty and individual liberty, then that's good.
Well, and I wouldn't say that freedom undermines democracy. I would say freedom overrides democracy.
Yeah.
Undermine is the wrong word because you're putting democracy above freedom, and that's the wrong order. Freedom comes first, and then because you are free, you can implement democracy. So freedom overrides democracy every time.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a good point.
They might be weaponizing freedom, but they're in their rights to do so.
Right.
And also it's not alt-right people. It's the working class.
Yeah.
The working class can span any part of the political spectrum.
Exactly.
I guarantee that not every trucker in the convoy is, well, let alone alt-right, but not even on the right. There's probably a lot of working class men in Canada that are on the left.
Right. Well, even you don't even need to go to the working class. You have people like Bill Maher and Jimmy Dore, who are lefties, who are now expressing, well, Jimmy Dore has been for a lot longer, expressing skepticism at vaccines generally, but specifically the vaccine mandates they've been against. And so it's like this is people that value freedom, whether you're on the left or the right of the spectrum, are going to be against these measures.
Right.
And if that overrides the will of the majority, if the majority, 51% of people say we want vaccine mandates, too bad.
Yeah.
You can't have it because that undermines individual liberty.
Yeah, it undermines freedom for people. Yeah.
Yeah. So
exactly.
It's a totally wrong phrasing, this word democracy. And the word democracy is going to go the same way as the public health institutions.
Yeah.
If they keep using the word democracy like this, people are going to start thinking, why do we even need democracy?
Exactly.
Democracy is just another public institution that doesn't work for us, and we don't want it anymore.
Well, and I think, too, you said that the phrasing is wrong, and I agree, but I don't think they view it as wrong. I do think that they actually put democracy above freedom. In their minds, they've misorganized how it's supposed to be. They've replaced freedom with democracy.
Right.
So to them, to people on the left who would agree with that statement from that tweet, it is undermining democracy because they are incorrect about the order of things in our nation.
Right.
I mean, it's also Canada, so maybe those things they fall differently in Canada, but
they shouldn't, right? Like
they shouldn't.
The idea of individual sovereignty and individual liberty is just like it's, as far as I can tell, it's a pervasive truth about the universe. Like, that's what they called inherent natural rights, right? They're inalienable rights. That is a philosophy that, if you accept as true, has to permeate every way you think about governance, right?
Right.
So, like, I would say the Canadian government is illegitimate for imposing vaccine mandates. I don't care what their population wants.
Right.
I don't care what lawful procedures they went through in their parliament. This is wrong. This is just wrong. It's an invasion of individual sovereignty, and so it's illegitimate.
I think the problem, though, is that as far as I can tell, the Canadian Constitution doesn't have God-given unalienable rights.
Right.
They don't list those out. That's not a thing. Your rights come from the government. So they don't have the same concept of freedom and individual liberty that we do, because they haven't accepted that philosophy that there are certain unalienable rights. Because that was a philosophy that existed before. There were philosophers that had come up with that.
Natural law.
Yeah. Natural law and the right to freedoms and liberties and things. And our founding fathers just took that and made sure to put it into our government so that you would avoid tyranny that we're seeing now.
They inverted the role of government. They said the government's not for subjugation. The government is for protecting individual liberty. Exactly. That hasn't worked out ideally, but the fact that those values are captured in our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, means that people like us are going to be able to look at our current government and say, hey, you're trampling all over this what is supposed to be this nation's like ethos. And that gives us the ammunition and the moral high ground, so to speak, to fight back against this. And I think Canadians are sort of just borrowing that. I think that they're saying, well, the Americans have the right idea. These vaccine mandates are wrong. There's nothing in our founding documents that would hint at that, but we're going to adopt that worldview anyway because we think it's true. You know,
if you protest long enough, you get your way.
Yeah, hopefully.
Disrupt society enough, yeah.
But so this article about the alt-right weaponizing democracy or weaponizing freedom says, in one part, freedom, of course, has not always been a concept usurped for selfish, malicious purposes. It's been a rallying cry behind great triumphs such as the end of slavery and the civil rights movement. But others have believed freedom is about protecting property rights, even if that has to occur at the diminishment of democracy. And then it says, more recently, political leaders and others with an unprecedented megaphone in the form of the internet and social media have used the call for freedom to promote bigoted, racist, and anti-democratic ideas. So this is the part that's particularly chilling. Freedom of speech being used to promote anti-democratic ideas?
Yeah, you're allowed to.
I'm absolutely stunned by that statement. That's freedom of speech. Your freedom of speech is not democratic. No one can vote to take away your freedom of speech.
Exactly.
You can say anything you want. You're right. It's not democratic. And it may be directly opposed to democracy.
The whole point.
Why? Because freedom overrides democracy.
That's why anarchists haven't been arrested in our country. Because they're allowed to criticize democracy.
Right.
They have the freedom to criticize the government in which they live under.
Yeah.
That's so stupid. Also, you're allowed to say bigoted and racist things. Racist jokes are funny. You're allowed to say them.
Right.
Bigoted jokes are funny. You're allowed to say them.
And even if you are a bigot and a racist, would you rather have that person openly announcing that they're a terrible person?
Yeah.
Or would you rather have them shut that in and find out at a much worse time that they're a bad person?
Let them be loudmouths so you can self-select to not engage with that person.
Right, exactly.
Instead of trying to shove them in a corner and isolate them and make them worse ultimately.
Yeah, and this bit about they believe freedom is about protecting property rights, even if that has to occur at the diminishment of democracy. Again, it's like, if you own something, no one can vote to take that away from you.
Yeah.
Ideally. But like, if you have property, you could get 99% of the nation to vote and say, we don't want this person to have their house. Guess what? That's illegitimate.
Or you can vote to move people into that house that you don't want living there, which I think is probably more so what they're trying to push here.
Yeah.
Or, moving people into your neighborhood that you don't want moved
into a
in.
community,
Or like, I saw a headline recently. I didn't put it in our show notes, but there was a hotel I want to say in Las Vegas or somewhere else in Nevada, that they were going to turn into a homeless shelter, and like the people of the community rioted, or not rioted, but they protested and were like, you're not doing this because this is our community. You're not going to bring this filth here, because whenever you put homeless people up in hotels, they don't get better.
Right.
They don't get the help they need. They just
drag down
have
the community.
a dry place to do their drugs, and that's it pretty much. So they aren't turning the hotel into a homeless shelter now. But I mean, that's pretty much what they're trying to say, is like, if somebody owns property, the government's allowed to tell you what you can do with that property that you own.
Right.
Whoever wrote this article has a really twisted definition of freedom.
Right.
Like what? Where does it stop?
They
freedom.
want democracy is a tool for them to implement their authoritarian worldview. And you see this all the time. As soon as democracy stops working in a way that allows them to impose their authoritarian worldview, they start criticizing it, right? Donald Trump was not the duly elected president because of Russian interference, because guess what? The democratic outcome was not what they wanted.
Exactly.
And they even criticize, some people would say, oh, well, he's an illegitimate president. And then other people would say, well, he lost the popular vote by like 5 million votes. So therefore, our system's broken and this is not a true democracy. And it's like, these people, they only want democracy when it achieves their ends.
Well, of course. I mean, that's like, everybody wants an outcome that is going to favor them. That's just human nature. You want whatever outcome of a situation to be favorable to you. But democracy, the systems of government are put in place so that we can enforce the outcome, even if half the population or more disagrees with it. That's the whole point. It's to protect the people and their voices. But more and more, I'm seeing that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I'm starting to become more sympathetic with Michael Malice's worldview.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the idea that basically, like, the idea that somebody can vote about your rights is just on its face absurd.
It's
like, the
silly.
idea that somebody can vote to take your guns away is a non-starter.
Yeah.
That's like, no, we're not having a discussion about this.
It's in the Constitution. No, you can't. Yeah, the big cities where it's like illegal to carry any kind of potentially lethal weapon, it just blows my mind. Like, you can't carry a knife. You can't. Some places like New York City, you can't even carry like mace, which is not lethal at all. Like, they just want you to be completely helpless. Mm-hmm. And as a woman, I'm like, okay, maybe you're saying that these things are illegal because when criminals have them, you can throw the book at them. Because they have, on top of their criminal activity, they also have possession of items that you've deemed illegal. But if you're a woman who lives in a big city and you have absolutely no way to protect yourself, then you see these videos of women who are being attacked on subways all the time.
Yeah.
If I lived in a big city, I'd carry a gun anyway. I'd rather be alive and having to pay a huge fine and get my firearm taken away than be assaulted or worse, killed. I mean, some women end up dead.
Right.
It's like, this is ridiculous. And it's because people of those cities voted probably to take those weapons away because they thought it would make them safer. And it's just the opposite.
Yeah, this is the framing that I love to use about the Second Amendment. It's like, if you take away somebody's right to own lethal force, you are forcing them to be a victim.
Yes.
They literally have no control over their own destiny when somebody aggresses against them.
Are you victim blaming right now?
I'm blaming the government for creating victims.
Yes.
So it's like, and people say, well, you can like punch and kick and whatever. It's like, okay, you have a 5'1" woman, 100 pounds, a 6'5", 300-pound dude. Who's going to win in that situation? Now, if the woman has a 6-shooter in her purse, guess what? Doesn't matter how big the dude is.
300-pound guy's probably not even going to try.
Right.
He's going to see a little shit of a woman with pointing a gun at him, and he's going to go, okay, not the right person to attack.
But just think about how just absolutely morally depraved that is to take away somebody's right to self-defense, the ability to defend themselves. And you're forcing them to be victims. You are giving them no choice. If somebody attacks you, you have to sit there and take it. There's nothing you can do.
Well, and in really awful cases, you're taking away that person's right to life. Mm-hmm. Because if they end up dead as a result of the attack, it's because they had no means to protect themselves.
Right.
So you just government sanctioned inability to protect your own life. Mm-hmm. And you took that life away. Of course, these are the same places that promote abortion, so obviously they don't care about human life at all, except when it's a prisoner who's done horrible atrocities and they don't want to put him on death row.
Right.
It's so backwards.
And they won't even
so
prosecute
opposite.
criminals either. Like you hear stories in New York all the time. Oh, this guy has a rap sheet that's a mile long, including like aggravated murder and stuff. And like he's out on the street. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's like $1,000 bail, and they're like, cool.
Right.
See ya.
Or like the Kyle Rittenhouse case, Joseph Rosenbaum. Why was he on the streets at all after having assaulted several young children?
And he was in a mental institution, in a mental hospital, and they released him. It's like, obviously he was there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Who cleared that guy? Who cleared that guy?
So it's like they're simultaneously they're not dishing out the appropriate punishments to criminals. They're not keeping them locked up for long enough, and they're simultaneously saying, "Oh, you're a law-abiding citizen. We don't want you having guns."
Exactly.
Has the murder rate gone down in New York from all the gun bans? No, there's shootings all the time. What about Chicago? Shootings
because
all
the
the time.
gun violence isn't typically just bystander to bystander. It's always gang violence.
Right.
So the gang violence doesn't go down because you've eliminated gun ownership legally, because they're still going to obtain weapons illegally. They're already criminals. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, if their rap sheet is already a mile long, throwing gun ownership on top of that is not really going to make a dent.
Right.
And that's the argument that I've tried to tell people who are pro-gun law every time I come across it, even when I went to a really liberal school, because it was something that people hadn't thought about. They're like, well, I just think that it would be safer. And I'm like, okay, you think it's safer, but what happens when somebody who's already a criminal doesn't care about the laws, is carrying a gun and points it at your head, and you have no way to defend yourself? And they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, that's a big problem, isn't it? You should probably think about that.
And what about like all these like suburban, rural communities where the gun ownership rate, especially across the Midwest, is really high? You know, just about every house has a gun in them. There aren't people on the streets shooting each other randomly. That never happened.
No.
Like, here's another way to frame it, right? Okay, you think gun laws, let's just say somebody thinks gun laws are a good idea. Ask them, what state of mind would you have to be in to take the gun that you own and shoot somebody without justification? Like, you owning a gun doesn't make you any more dangerous to anyone else.
No.
Like, most people just want to live their lives. Most people never want to have to hurt anyone ever, period.
Right.
And so having guns in the hands of private citizens does not automatically make the society more dangerous. That just doesn't happen. Like, you see a gun, it doesn't compel you to like go on a murder spree.
No.
Like, no one in their right mind is going to do that. Right. And of course, there's going to be a couple of mentally deranged individuals that do that.
Yes, which is just part of being in a society.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate part.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of these cases, like the mental problems are noticed but go completely unaddressed.
Right.
Until it gets to the breaking point, and then you end up with these tragedies. Like, it's usually not the first step of an unwell person to just pick up a gun and go shoot.
No,
it's
that's
a long
true.
series of...
It's a lot of ignored or dismissed symptoms and signs. Like, anybody who writes a manifesto and nobody tries to help that person...
Right.
You knew it was coming. But also, it goes back to the same point we were making. If there is a deranged person in your community, the answer is not to eliminate guns from the sane people. Because if someone deranged goes on a shooting spree in your community, hopefully most people in that community own a weapon and can stop the threat.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that means.
Right.
It's not just self-defense, it's defense of your entire community.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just takes one person to stop that.
Right. And the benefit of having a bunch of private citizens carrying guns is that the person that's perpetrating some heinous act isn't going to be aware at that moment of who all has a gun.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy as a bystander to be behind the person and take out your gun and just pop it. Like, this happens all the time. Like, there's one famous video where a guy came in and tried to do an attempted church shooting. And he walked right past the doorman and started like looking for people to shoot, and the doorman just shot him in the back.
Yeah.
And it's like, there you go. Like, that's the benefit of having basically incognito gun owners, is that it's impossible for a criminal to accurately assess the risk and accurately deal with all the threats that might be coming towards the criminal's life.
Exactly.
So it's like decentralized security, which is
and
brilliant.
the problem too with deranged shooters is that they pick places where they assume there's not going to be guns. So it's always churches or mosques or temples.
Schools.
And schools. And so I am very much pro let teachers have guns in schools. Obviously, children should not have weapons, and so that doesn't change.
No.
But I think the teachers should be allowed to have a concealed carry weapon. Because what if there's an active shooter in your school? yes, you don't want to have to stop one of your own students, but at the same time, they're putting a lot of lives in danger. And it's like, if teachers had the option of carrying a gun, they would have to be very vetted and probably take like a state sanctioned concealed carry class and like show their proof of concealed carry or whatever. But I don't think that's a bad idea, especially in some of these really large schools where there's thousands of students. You cannot keep track of every single student when there's thousands of kids coming through there, and a lot of kids probably falling through the cracks. You just can't. And school shootings happen with such a prevalence now that it's like, why is it even a question of teachers should or shouldn't carry weapons?
Right. Exactly. If you're trained, what's the problem? Again, the teacher's not going to be compelled to shoot a student that's acting up.
No.
That's not going to happen.
Shut your mouth!
Yeah. Oh, man. But it's obviously have rules, like don't leave the gun unattended in the classroom. Like if you're going to carry, make sure it's concealed and on your person at all times.
Which is the point of a concealed carry.
Right, exactly. But there should be some discipline done for teachers that don't handle their weapons properly in a classroom setting. But yeah, I think and you get that that implicit effect, which is adding guns into a situation that would previously have been assumed to have no guns, right?
Exactly.
It's a deterrent. It's like it's hard to measure. You can't measure this, but how many school shootings would you stop if attackers knew that there was a non-zero chance that 20% of the teachers were carrying guns in that school?
Well, and that's the thing. If you openly advertised in your district or whatever, like, it is optional that teachers have concealed carry weapons. We have a roster of who those teachers are. We're not going to disclose it to the public for the safety of those teachers and the students. But if you openly advertise that to people in your community, chances are nobody's going to even try.
Right.
They're going to pick a different target because they don't know who's carrying and when, like you said, and they'll probably get dropped.
Probably. And so I have this story, which I don't want to go too deep into, but this ties in really nicely to what we were just talking about. It's called Guns, Germs, Bitcoin, and the Antisocial Right. And this is by the dumbest mamma jamma I've ever seen, Paul Krugman. I think he's an Ivy League graduate. He doesn't sound like it, but so basically in this article, Mr. Krugman argues that all of the right's positions are motivated by antisocial behavior. And I think he's getting antisocial mixed up with freedom.
Oh, okay.
Again.
Okay.
Because his solutions throughout this article is he's like, oh, well, Republicans are in opposition to gun control laws and instead want to arm teachers. And it's like,
I just said that.
Because, exactly. Because we are, you can call that antisocial, but if you're thinking from the top down, then you have the view of Mr. Krugman. If you're thinking from the bottom up, then you have the view of us.
Right.
And I'm always going to take the side of decentralization and rights when I can.
Me too.
And so, he talks about how Bitcoin is like a desire to get away from the institutions. It's like, because the institutions are centralized systems that can be manipulated.
Oh my God.
If you can hedge against that with Bitcoin, then you should do that.
Yeah.
Having guns in schools is a hedge against school shootings and also an exercise of your Second Amendment rights. So this one part that's relevant is pretty astounding. So he says, among major advanced nations, such shootings, he's referring to school shootings, are an almost uniquely U.S. phenomenon. Yes, there's 400 million guns in the nation. That's why this would happen. And while there may be multiple reasons America leads the world in massacres of school kids, we could surely mitigate the horror with common sense measures like restrictions on gun sales, required background checks, and a ban on privately owned assault weapons, which, if this guy was smart at all, would realize that these are basically in place.
And also, there's no such thing as an assault weapon.
Right.
There's literally nothing that is classified as an assault weapon in the gun community. So he obviously doesn't know anything about guns. And there's not really restriction on gun sales unless you're in the bigger cities.
Right. Well, you do have to do background checks when you're buying from a
anywhere.
FDL, is that what it's called? Federal dealer?
I don't think it matters. Even, well, I guess if you're just private to private, but if it's like a storefront, yes, you do have to do a background check because they have certain licenses and, restrictions that they have to follow as well. But it doesn't take that long to get a background check done. They do it in their stores.
Right.
And it takes like 40 minutes.
And look, he says this is common sense. And then he says, but no, Republicans want to expand access to guns and in many states protect students by arming school teachers. And it's like, no. First of all, that's a wrong phrasing.
Yeah.
I have not seen any proposal that was like, yeah, we're going to give guns to all the teachers and teach them how to use it. No, the proposals I've seen is if you have a teacher that is already trained and has a concealed carry license, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to carry that into school.
Well, and in constitutional carry states also, they should be allowed to carry in their schools.
Exactly. So it's not, he's framing it as like, oh, Republicans just want to give guns to teachers and teach them how to use it. No, we just want to expand the locations where you can carry your gun if you're so inclined to do so.
And it's not really expanding access to the guns themselves. It's just expanding, like you said, where you can carry them.
Right.
Because
you can buy any gun you want.
You can buy a gun off of a private person. You can buy it online and have it shipped to you. Like, it's not actually that hard to buy a gun.
Right.
But where you can actually take it gets difficult and tricky.
Exactly, yeah.
And there are some private businesses that say we don't want any guns in our shop, and so you should probably respect that and not at all. But the whole point of a concealed carry is that nobody knows you have it until you have to use it.
Right, exactly.
So even if it's a private business that says, hey, no guns, just don't holster it on your hip, like actually hide it somewhere, and they're not going to know. It's not like they're checking everybody's bags and backsides.
Right. And this thing about, common sense gun measures, not only are most of these or all of these on the books in some way or another, but he's framing it as if like right-wing people don't agree with these. It's like, I don't think that violent felons, should ever be out on the streets again, but if they are let out on the streets, that they should ever own a gun again.
Right.
How do you verify that they can't own a gun unless you run a background check?
Exactly.
So it's like, I understand the right-wing arguments against background checks, especially when you're dealing with a centralized database of gun owners. Like, it can't get to that stage, but if you're just checking the criminal history of an individual before you allow the sale of a weapon, that sounds that sounds reasonable to me. That obviously doesn't prevent like backdoor sales where somebody with a clean record buys a gun and then sells it to a criminal. But at least they can't just walk into
some sort of mitigation, though. And I don't think there's any kind of database for gun owners right now.
Not yet.
But
I know I'm saying it could morph into it very easily.
I mean, as far as I know, they just run the background check and then say yay or nay as far as if they're going to sell you the gun. There was another point that I wanted to make, and now it's gone. Dang. I thought it was good, too.
Well, maybe you'll think of it.
Maybe.
I'm going to read one more excerpt from his article.
Okay.
This one is a little bit chunky, but he goes on to say public health policy, if you think about it, reflects the same principle. Individuals can and should take responsibility for their own health when they can, but the nature of infectious disease means that there is an essential role for collective action, whether it's public investment in clean water supplies or, yes, mask and vaccine mandates during a pandemic. Again, he's comparing apples to oranges. He's saying a clean water supply is the same as forcing somebody to inject something into their body. Here's the thing with my city water. I don't have to drink it.
True.
I mean, I use it for like cooking and stuff, right? And I filter it, but I don't have to use the city water if I don't. If I want to, I could go buy a property in rural Midwest and dig my own well if I wanted to.
You can also just buy giant jugs of spring water.
Yeah.
They sell them. You can buy 100 gallons of spring water.
Yeah. So he's equating paying taxes for public infrastructure to injecting people against their will.
It's because they view people as a utility.
Exactly. How does anyone think like that? First of all, how do you think that's a viable comparison, an apples to apples comparison? How is that an apples to apples comparison? And they're totally different. You're talking about individuals and individual rights versus just the infrastructure.
My eye is twitching.
Mr. Krugman seems to have that effect on people.
Yeah.
I call him Mr. Krugman because he has that like air of wisdom about him, but then he's just a total retard.
He's an academic retard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that college makes people smarter.
I think it makes them dumber.
I think that's right. And he says, and you don't have to be a socialist to recognize the need for regulation to maintain the reliability of essential aspects of the economy like the electricity supply and monetary system. Once again, I don't know how he's tying this into like antisocial behavior.
Who is suggesting socialism?
Yeah.
What? Where did that come from? Just throw that in there too.
He's trying to say that because the right wing values individual freedom so much that it's incongruent that we would support public infrastructure
or social programs, I guess.
Or social programs. It's like,
I don't think that's true though. I mean, there's some people that are probably purists and don't agree with the social programs that we have in place, but I mean, they're not that vast. Like, I don't have a problem with my taxes going to help feed mothers and children.
Or to maintain the electrical grid.
or the roads that I drive on every day.
Well, here's the right-wing framing of this, too. Like, that, okay, if you, Mr. Krugman, I'm going to lean into your antisocial behavior. Roads enable me to leave my hellhole state if I want to.
Also, they are a public commodity. So by traveling on them, you could argue that you're not being antisocial because you have to share the road with other people.
See, yeah, it's just, he's doing what Scott Adams calls wordthink. He's just like assigning definitions to words and then using that as his basis for his argument, but it's totally incoherent.
I have a new proposition that anybody who writes an opinion piece and wants to change definitions of words needs to first list out the words and the definitions they'll be using before they write their article, so that we all have an even playing field and we can comprehend the nonsense that is your word vomit. That should be a requirement for opinion pieces.
I'm going to lean into total fascism and make that a requirement for the vote. I'm going to vote
that
for
a mandate.
I'm going to vote that all of Mr. Krugman's articles have to be peer reviewed by us. But the public infrastructure is actually in a different sense of the word, it democratizes an individual's ability to make a living, to travel. Roads enable economic mobility as well as physical mobility. Electricity is the same deal. You get electricity, you get internet, boom, you can have any one of any virtual jobs that you want. It's like these public infrastructure actually enable freedoms because you can exercise your freedoms across a wider variety of domains.
Well, and I was reading the next line where he talks about social cooperation. And
well, do you want to read it?
Sure. So the first line says, which is why I'm calling the modern American right antisocial, because its members reject any policy that relies on social cooperation, and they want us to return instead to Hobbes's dystopian state of nature. I didn't really think that Hobbes was dystopian, maybe utopian.
I'm not familiar with Hobbes, so I won't opine.
Anyway, but my first thought about the social cooperation and how people on the right are rejecting that, my immediate thought was, if we reject social cooperation, then the entire idea of a free market would collapse. Because you can't have a free market without cooperation, because the demands and resources and how you access them are what drives the free market, and you cannot gain access to resources unless you cooperate with other people, because it's a trading basis. If you are antisocial actually and don't know how to trade and talk to people, you're not going to get anything out of that market. And so actually socialism and communism are more antisocial than free market capitalism, because it's just the government tells you what you're getting, how much you get paid, how much you pay in taxes, and you get everything handed to you. Essentially, it's not good, but they do it for you. And so there's no motivation to interact with other people and try to drive that market and make your money.
Yeah.
And people on the right are very much in support of capitalism and free market trades. So I just think that is inherently false.
And then to build off of that, the conservative opposition to rigid government imposed structures is exactly for the purpose of enabling people to engage with society in the way that they see fit. Right? The more rigid you make the government, I think that's what the argument you're getting at. The more rigid you make the government, the more antisocial it becomes, because you literally have no options.
Right.
If we say we want everyone to have guns, we want to have roads, we want people to have Bitcoin or US dollars or other assets in the stock market, we want people to work virtually and working class, it gives everyone an opportunity to find their own little slice of the market.
Exactly.
It gives everyone the opportunity to live their life as they see fit in accordance with their values. That is, it's not antisocial.
No.
It's just we want to remove the oppressive nature of the government off of the backs of people so they can flourish, so they can do what they want to do.
Right. And I hate to keep going back to the gun argument, but it is important. And it's another thing that I just thought of. Higher rates of gun ownership would also promote social cooperation, right? Because if I think that you might have a weapon, I'm not going to do anything to slight you. Not that you're going to just pull out a gun and shoot somebody, but you're less likely to do things that are going to harm other people. So that also inherently promotes social cooperation. And since he's trying to tie all of these things together, we might as well also tie all of these things together. So pretty much everything he's saying is antithetical to actual right-wing values and beliefs. And I would say that right-wing people are actually probably more social and more cooperative than people on the left, because we aren't also walking around calling everyone and their mother a bigot and a racist and a horrible person that's going to hell because of something they said 10 years ago. So I think he's just projecting. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's another case of, I want the government to do what I view as the correct thing to do, and these people who resist the government are standing in my way. He just wrote an article that basically says that. Like, he might as well have written that.
Well, and I had a thought a little bit ago when we were talking about the weaponization of freedom and undermining democracy, and how that's should actually be flipped and freedom overrides democracy. It always seems to be that it's old men like Mr. Krugman who don't value freedom. Like, young men value freedom more than old men do, because they value security more than freedom. Because they've gotten to an age in their life where maybe they know a little too much. And so the thought of freedom is a little scary, because they don't want no safety net, essentially. They want stability, and security and a safety net provides them that stability because they're old men. And from his little profile picture, he doesn't look like a young man.
No, he's quite old.
But that also makes sense, because our founding fathers were young men. They were in their 20s.
Were they?
Or younger.
Some of them were. Some of them were older.
Ish, but not any older than like mid-30s. They were still fairly young.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe in that society they were...
Ben Franklin was the outlier. I think he was older.
Yeah. I think maybe in that society...
But they were by and large fairly young.
Yeah, like mid-30s might have been considered like a wise adult or something. But I think generally speaking, they were young men who really valued their freedom over security.
Right.
Because I think that's just how humans develop. As you get older and you're not as strong and capable of taking care of yourself, you start to value security more.
Well, there's a psychological component. We know that young men are more likely to take risks.
Exactly.
And so, fighting a war against the greatest empire at that time was a huge risk. And doing it based on an entirely new governing philosophy was also a huge risk. And these guys were all in for it, right? So it's like, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Like, he seems very risk averse. Like, he wants things to be top down controlled, because everything, if you don't do that, then everything's somewhat unpredictable.
Well, and I think that this supports the argument of, we need to get all of these old people out of government. If you are 70 years old or older, you should not be running our government anymore, because you way overvalue security than freedom. And you are risk averse, and you're going to play it safe, but sometimes playing it safe is not the right route to take, because it ends up worse off for the younger generations who are willing to take those risks. So I think we just need a blanket statement that government is a young man's game, and we need to say, like, there's a minimum age that you can be to be president, but there should also be a maximum age.
Yeah.
Like, if you're older than, say, 60, I don't think you should be allowed to run for president.
If you need an afternoon nap to just continue on with your day,
exactly,
you shouldn't be president.
I mean, Trump's an outlier as far as, like, spry 70-year-olds, but
it's because he's doing coke in the Oval Office, Sadie. That's what the left wing told me.
He's probably on Adderall. But, I mean, if you think about it, if you are 60 and you get into the presidency, you technically could serve for 8 years. So that puts you at 68 by the time you're done, which is retirement age.
True.
So if you're running for president after 68 as like a retirement gig or something, you're in the wrong game. You need to get out, because we need somebody who's young and with it and able to make it potentially 8 years before they're completely expired.
Yeah.
And they're also going to take the risks that will probably yield a higher benefit to the American people.
I agree.
So that's my thought on that.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to talk about microaggressions?
Sure. Oh, better yet, let's listen to a song about microaggressions.
Oh, boy. So I'm getting this queued up. Do you want to set the stage here?
Yes. So Libs of TikTok, wonderful Libs of TikTok, tweeted this out. No caption, no nothing. It's just a video of something that was playing on Disney Junior, which I don't know why an adult would be watching Disney Junior, but Libs of TikTok screen recorded the person.
Could have been with they saw their kid watching it.
Yeah, I guess. And the caption on the video says, "Disney Junior better know," which just means that they're in agreement with what's happening on the video. So let's play it. And I had to cringe through this, so you all get to cringe through this.
Oh boy, here we go.
Bye, Mom. Hey, Gabrielle. I didn't know that was your mom. Your skin is so much darker than hers. Hold it. Did that comment make you feel uncomfortable? That's a microaggression. What's a microaggression? A microaggression is when someone says or does something that makes you feel bad. Sometimes just because of your race. But you know what? He's wrong. You should be proud of your skin. It's what makes you, you. I know just how you feel, Mommy, sad and blue. He said that awful thing and you don't know what to do. That's not okay to say about your beautiful skin. To find your voice and your power within. Speak up, because you got something to say.
Wow.
Speak up, it's okay to walk away. Speak up, because you got something to say. Speak up, it's okay to walk away.
Ooh, I gotta feel your hair. It's such an unusual texture.
We know just how you
Always the
feel
hair.
when it wasn't okay. The way she touched your
Oh.
hair and didn't give you a say. We wish you didn't do that to your awesome hair. Allow us to make it perfectly clear. Speak up.
The power fist. Did you catch that?
I did.
Speak up, it's okay to walk away. Speak up, because you got something to say. Speak up, it's okay to walk away.
To anyone who's just listening,
Pass the ball over here. Hey, Kingston, why do
Hold
you
on.
talk like that? You don't sound like the other black kids I know. We wish you
Oh,
hadn't
wow.
So, to anyone who's just listening, everyone who's said something, quote, bad or made the other kids feel bad were white. And all of the kids that had something mean said to them are black or brown. And I just think it's so funny because there was also only 3 white people in that whole video and the rest of them were black or brown, which, unless you're in an urban area, is probably not the case.
But also, wouldn't the white kids be the minority in that situation? So
Exactly.
you could microaggress against the white kids. Like, what happens if you got a
Yeah, you're so pasty. What the hell?
Yeah, if you got a ginger kid with like a Jew fro.
Exactly. That's a microaggression?
Well, you're telling me a black kid wouldn't be like, hey, that looks interesting. Can I feel that hair? Would that be a microaggression? Like,
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing that bothers me. We didn't get all the way through it. Should I keep playing
No,
it?
because I think it's just the chorus again.
Okay. The thing that bothers me the most about this is, number one, kids say rude things all the time. And number two, it's the noticing that there's differences in people, especially when a kid does it, is just a purely innocent thing in most cases. You say, oh, what was the example? Like, you're darker than your mom or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like that's just an observation that the kid doesn't have a filter for.
Right.
Like, the kid is not harboring some intent of racism. They're just noticing a difference and blurting it out.
Well, that's the dumb thing about microaggressions in general. It's usually just somebody is just having a conversation with another person who may look different than them or have a different experience from them, and they don't necessarily know how to point out the observation, and they just kind of put their foot in their mouth.
Right.
That's essentially all that a microaggression is. And even when I was in college and I worked for the housing department, we learned about, quote, microaggressions, and these were all the examples that they used. And it's like, I mean, you probably shouldn't touch people's hair without asking in general.
Right.
And
That's like basic social skills.
yeah, and like, what was the other one? Oh, you don't talk like other black kids that I know. Like, that's just an observation that you put your foot in your mouth, and like, you probably shouldn't have said that. People are like, well, what, you think that because I'm black and from the ghetto or whatever. It's like, no, that's the point that they're making. Like, you're black and you're not from the ghetto and you talk different or whatever.
Right.
Or, yeah.
We've all seen white people that talk like gangsters and you're just like, bro, why are you talking like that?
Yeah, you're
because
white.
Yeah, because
Stop.
it's like, it's just, there's cultural, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything about you or your race even. It's just a cultural thing.
Yeah.
You could be black and grow up in a different place that's not, like an urban setting, and you're going to talk different. And same deal with like a white person, like Eminem. He talks different
I think it has a lot to do with
people.
the class too. Like,
Yeah.
your class has a lot to do with how you speak and how you dress and things like that. And also the skin color one, especially if we're talking about kids, they don't necessarily understand the genetics of melatonin. Or not melatonin, melanin. Melatonin is how you sleep. They don't understand the genetics.
Well, are you saying black people put you to sleep, Sadie? Oh my god, that's quite the microaggression. That might be a macroaggression, actually. We might have to throw your ass in the slammer.
It's fine. Yeah, that's just a kid who doesn't understand genetics of melanin, and that you can have different levels of melanin. From parents. I mean, maybe his dad's really dark, and so he got the dark skin from his dad. But also with mixed kids, like, they tend to have lighter skin because they have one white parent and they have one brown or black parent. It's like, that's just genetics. But what they're probably in like first or second grade, like, they don't know that. They haven't taken a biology class yet. They don't know. So saying, "Oh, I didn't know that was your mom because you're so much darker," like, that's
just a basic learning experience.
That's just a learning experience, and all the kid would have to say is, "Oh, my dad's dark too." And then you're like, "Oh, makes sense.
Right.
I got it."
Yeah, it's so pernicious to teach kids at whatever age this is geared towards, younger kids, elementary age, school kids probably. Yeah. It's so pernicious to teach them, oh, if somebody offends you with a, maybe a comment about race or whatever, then that's automatically a bad thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. I've had interactions with just my friends who are white people where we've all had this where we just say something inelegantly and it comes off the wrong way.
Yeah, and you're like,
is that a microaggression, or is that just like a lapse in social skills?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, make you feel bad in the moment, but usually after the person explains, they're like, "I didn't mean it that way. I said it wrong," or whatever.
Right.
And then they apologize, and then you move on.
But yeah, it's like elevating instances like this to a level of importance that they should not be at is just not. And of course, you have like, they're literally like training communists, like, say something, stand up, fist in the air.
Well, they did say you could also walk away.
I guarantee you, in less than a year, that part's not even going to be included.
Probably.
Like, they're gonna get everyone on board with this. You either say something or you walk away. When everyone's on board with that, we're going to chop off the or walk away part, and you have to say something.
Yes.
It is racist if you let that microaggression happen and you don't say something.
Well, that's already the the anti-racist teaching.
Yeah, if you don't say something, you're racist.
Yeah, like I don't remember what they call it exactly. It's been a while since I heard the terms, but yeah, you're still a racist if you don't say anything. Or silence is violence or whatever.
Oh, yes.
That's the whole thing. It's like, well, you watched an active case of racism and you said nothing, so you're like racist by proxy, essentially, which is so stupid. And in that first bit too, when she's like, he said something mean and he was wrong. It's like, well, no, he wasn't wrong. The kid is darker than his mom.
Right.
That's true. That's factually true. You can look at them and go, one is darker than the other, but he just didn't know why. And even that interaction, I mean, it didn't look like he was trying to be mean about it. He was just like, "Oh, I didn't know that was your mom."
Right.
And of course, the very first aggressor is like a little white boy.
Ascribing maliciousness immediately to that sort of interaction is also very not desirable.
I feel like that little girl is just
a little commie,
irritating to be around. Like, she came out of the school storming like, "He said something mean to you. He's wrong." I'd be like, "Bitch, this doesn't involve you." Get out of here. Who are you? But little girl's got to butt in.
Yeah. It's just, you know what else I think of too? It's like, you see those videos of like white people going to African nations and all the little African kids like gather around and like touching the white person. Is that a microaggression?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you have like, okay, I get the hair thing. You shouldn't touch people's hair, but they're also kids. And they see something that looks like it might feel interesting and they go, "Ooh, can I?"
Kids touch everything.
Right. that's just
even
like,
without asking. They're
but
just
that's why I brought up the example of you see the videos of white people going to Africa. You see the little African kids doing the same thing to the white person because they're kids. They're curious. They want to know what things feel like. They want to know why things are the way they are.
I should have put this in here, but I watched a video recently. Just kind of randomly, it was like suggested to me on YouTube or whatever, but it was a high school aged girl who is black as far as I can tell. She might be mixed, like Asian and black or whatever, but she lives in South Korea and she goes to high school in South Korea, and she had her hair natural for a really long time, which just meant like the afro curls.
Okay.
And she went and got box braids, which is a protective hairstyle so that you can promote growth or whatever. And she's like, nobody at my school has ever seen box braids before. They have never seen me with my hair done, and I'm going to school right now and I'm going to get all their reactions, and they're all South Korean kids, and they're like, oh, what's that, you know, and they're like touching it and playing with it, and she's like totally cool with it. She has no problem with it because she knows it's different, and she knows that it's not something that they're used to. And so they're like touching the ends and they're like smacking each other with it because they're like really long braids, and they're like, it's so pretty, it's weird to look at you like that because we've never seen you like this before. And it's just like a natural curiosity, like you said, but there was no malice there. But I'm sure whoever wrote this would watch that video, which was posted by a black girl, and say that those are microaggressions.
Right.
But she knew that they were going to react like that. And she was like laughing, and she actually thought it was fun that they were reacting that way, you know?
Right.
And they weren't mean about it. They were just kind of like, oh, this is going to take some getting used to or whatever.
I thought the left used to be about celebrating the differences of people, but now it's like, if you notice a difference, you're a bad person. What?
Yeah, remember when it was a crime to say I don't see color, and now it's like they don't want you to see color again? They want you to see it, but they don't want you to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so wildly inconsistent. Like, you have to be anti-racist, right? You have to say something when you see something. But also, if you notice that a black person is darker than their mom, that's racist. Like, what? How am I supposed to be anti-racist if I first can't identify a minority?
Yeah.
You're putting it's a Kafka trap, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
It's like, and it's just a mechanism of control.
Right,
that's all
you're not supposed to notice it first, but then also if you don't notice it, you're still a racist.
Right.
Because minorities need to be uplifted or whatever.
It's so psychotic.
I just don't think they need my help.
Yeah.
They don't need my help. They are fully functional adults capable of handling themselves. They are people on this earth. Why do you need help from some random white chick?
Right.
Are you saying that you're inferior to me? I'm not saying that, but are you saying that?
Right.
I don't want to help your ass figure it out.
Right. Well, then they have the term white savior too, but then they're also saying you have to stand up and say something. It's like, which one do you want me to do?
I feel like white savior usually only applies if it's like people adopting a child that's like black or Asian or something.
But it's like,
stupid.
I don't know how you can have it both ways.
You
like,
can't.
You either need white people or you don't, and you're saying you need both at the same time. It's totally inconsistent. How anyone buys this garbage is beyond me.
It's because they are trying to embody the collective people instead of valuing individualism. If we just go back to valuing individualism, all of these issues would go away. If you say something wrong to somebody, they'll let you know, and then you'll know not to say that again to that specific person.
Right.
It's not that hard.
Right. Stand up for yourself. You don't need whiteys over here helping you.
Let's go back to like social intelligence.
Yeah, right. Okay, so this is the last thing we have, which is this TikTok slams Target over suspiciously cheap sweater. What is this?
Yeah. So
is this going to autoplay? Okay, here we go.
I guess it is a video, but we can just scroll down. So yes, they are suspicious, and they say people are exploited to get clothing that's this affordable. Yeah. So
here's the sweater in question.
Here's the sweater. It's a crocheted sweater, and it's explained in the article. But if you know anything about crochet, which I'm sure you don't, Jacob,
I don't.
You cannot replicate it in a machine. There's knitting machines and there's looming machines, which do different kinds of stitches and weaving.
Okay.
But crochet is a specific fabric making technique where you take yarn and a hook, and you have to stick the hook through your previous rows and make more loops, essentially.
Okay.
So there isn't a machine yet that has been able to replicate that, because you can also take it and make very unique shapes, because you can pretty much just put your hook wherever and put your yarn wherever and it makes a new shape.
Okay.
So it's not like it's not a grid type of weaving or looming or anything.
It's more freeform.
It is more freeform. So people make sweaters like this all the time. It's pretty popular with lefties now. Like crocheting is like the big leftist craft now, which just makes me feel weird. But so the opening section here says multiple TikTokers have accused Target of potentially underpaying employees after discovering the department store was selling a crochet sweater for $35. Crochet, the TikTokers argued, can only be stitched by hand for the reasons that I just explained. One user who goes by C-Trick on the platform previously worked as a costume designer and still shares sewing videos on their account. Thanks to another TikTok user's math, C-Trick was able to break down the possible hourly pay someone hand making the sweater would have earned. And then that is accounting for, like, you know, labor costs, material costs, all that stuff.
Right.
And so then a representative for Target told In the Know that, quote, at Target, we place high priority on requiring that everything we source is produced ethically and in accordance with all applicable laws, international standards, and our policies, including holding ourselves and our partners to a high standard of respect for human rights. We can confirm that the crochet sweater was produced at a location that is in accordance with our high standards and in accordance with wage requirements. That's tricky, though, because if your wage requirements are only 40 cents an hour, wherever this thing is being made, then that's technically true.
They basically just said, we are adhering to the specifications that we created.
Well, specifications you created, but also if you're offshoring your labor, you're meeting the standards of whatever the labor laws are in that country.
Right.
I'm thinking China, thinking
Malaysia,
Thailand.
Yeah.
Places that have much lower wage rates than in the United States.
Right, exactly.
So I believe this is C-Trick's quote, said, you would be paying $2 an hour. Now, Target obviously needs to make a profit off of this, and they are paying for materials, which means they are paying employees about $1.40 an hour.
Jeez.
But again, if $1.40 an hour is for somebody who lives in like a third world nation, essentially,
might be
that's
okay.
Pretty standard, I would say.
Yeah, it's probably the minimum wage, right? If that's the wage law, then
yeah, that's the wage law. It's very likely that these sweaters were made in sweatshops. Oh, you don't say. A place like Target sources their material making to sweatshops. I am not surprised. And then they go on to say, we've gotten so used to these minimal prices that we barely even think about them anymore. But the reality is people are exploited to get clothing that's this affordable. And that's the light bulb moment, isn't it? That's a red pill for these people.
For their lefties.
For the lefties, because they go to Target probably every day, spend who knows how much money, never look at the tag and see where it's made, never think about how it's made, and they just go on their merry way. But then this one thing really flipped them because again,
it's so obviously handmade.
It's so obviously handmade, and crochet has made a huge boom on TikTok. Like there's tons of TikToks of people crocheting, so it's a big trend, and so it's something that's really in their focus. And so they put the pieces together, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is probably slave labor." And it's like, wow, you're just coming to that now,
right?
Okay, maybe you'll stop shopping at Target then.
Maybe.
Or maybe you'll just go, yeah, there's slave labor, but I still benefit from it. So,
well, I think it's perhaps a white pill. I think more and more people are starting to become disillusioned with Chinese manufacturing, offshore manufacturing specifically. I don't know if that's going to translate into any real progress because, of course, you're still battling the shareholders of these various companies, right? And it's just going to take somebody with the political willpower. Like Donald Trump was doing a good job of making trade with China a little bit less idealistic,
right,
or a little bit less ideal for these companies, but it's like it's such a mess. I don't know how we get out from under it, like because you have the American consumer that's used to paying no more than $35 for a sweater, right? If you start paying those people $7.25 an hour or whatever the minimum wage is here, I think that's what it is. You're gonna get a sweater that's many times more expensive than that.
Exactly.
Or you're gonna have to crochet it yourself.
which a lot of people do.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people saw this on Target's website and went, oh, I can make that, and just made it themselves. But this is for the people who don't have that skill or don't want to make it themselves and just want to pay a cheap amount of money. But at the same time, it's like if you are what they call this fast fashion. So it's like H&M is fast fashion. Anything that's mass produced and is relatively inexpensive for the consumer is considered fast fashion.
I see.
And so if you're somebody who regularly consumes fast fashion, you kind of have to come to terms with the fact that the clothes that you're wearing were made by somebody who makes far less than you do.
Right.
And that is the free market. That is capitalism. That is how you, the consumer, benefit from that free market. And if you're not okay with that, then you can start making your own clothes. You can buy secondhand,
Right.
which is what I do. I do both of those things. I don't think I've bought anything brand new from a company in years. And it's not because I'm against fast fashion. I enjoy making my own things
Right.
more than I do
But
shopping.
here's the problem with like the free market. Is it really a free market though? Like, because the US market is literally non-competitive for manufacturing these types of things. Like the problem is like,
Yeah.
you know, offshoring to China, you avoid all of the EPA regulations,
Right.
you avoid all of the labor laws, you avoid the higher minimum wage. So is that really a free market, or are they just going to the lowest common denominator? They're saying, oh, well, we can manufacture it in China for much cheaper and then ship it all the way back across the world. That's not really a free market. That's just like a no-brainer, right? Like,
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I don't know how can we in the United States say we want all these environmental protections, but it's okay if our companies go and exploit the lackluster environmental protections in China. Like, how do you hold those two views simultaneously? That's not really a free market. We've made a value statement encapsulated in our labor laws and environmental laws. But then we throw our hands up and say, well, that's a free market when companies go and totally dodge
Right.
those laws somewhere else. I don't understand
I
that.
think-
That's a disconnect.
It is a disconnect, but I think that's why this is such a red pill, because if this is something that wakes up leftists especially who like love companies like Target, who are just not good companies, right? Holistically, they just aren't, because they're big national companies. I think more people who realize that there's slave labor involved and there's regulations that they're avoiding, and you know, China is a big pollutant. Like this, I think, is going to hopefully snowball them to realizing that like China is the biggest pollutant in the world, and slave labor is rampant still in our world. And I mean, I guess it's not really slave labor, but it basically is.
Might
It's
as well be.
indentured servitude, basically.
Yeah.
I think this is going to snowball into something that might bring back some semblance of an actual free market, because if they decide that they don't want to spend their money at Target anymore and they want to purchase more artisanal crafted things and spend more money up front for something that's going to last longer and is going to be paying somebody a fair living wage, I think that is going to open the free market up to much greater demands for things like that. Maybe not, probably not, but maybe, because if enough people get fed up with large companies like this, it might happen.
Right.
And they might actually have to start adhering to things that people want, like wages that
Right.
are livable for employees.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if there's a quote unquote free market solution for that. I think governments need to come forcefully down and say, no, we're going to enforce our values on you. We're going to say,
Yeah.
you can't dodge environmental laws. If that means applying an equalizing tariff and say, well, you saved this much money by dodging our labor laws and our environmental laws, so we're just going to slap a tariff that brings that cost back in line. You would see companies relocate to the United States real quick.
Right.
So
And then the whole fast fashion slave labor thing would go out the window, because you'd have to pay factory workers or whatever
Right.
livable wages. So
maybe they'd invent a crochet machine out of necessity.
true.
But yeah, I think that's it for the stories that we had. Anything else you wanted to say?
No, that's it.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for watching and or listening. This is Take Your Medicine. Again, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Sadie.
And you can follow us at all of our social links in the description wherever you're watching or listening. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.